going to solve equations using the square root method. So your goal is to get the x by itself, the variable by itself, and we're going to be using square roots to do that. The first thing on this first one that we want to do is go ahead and subtract 7 from both sides, because the x squared has to be isolated before you can do anything with it. So x squared, opposites cancel, equals 43 take away 7 is 36. Now to get rid of a square, you have to take the square root of both sides. However, when you take the square root of the right hand side, you have to put plus or minus. Here's the reason why. Well, let me go ahead and solve it and then I'll explain why. So opposites cancel. Plus or minus, the square root of 36 is 6. The reason you need the plus or minus is because 6 times 6, if it's positive, 6 times 6 is 36, but also negative 6 times negative 6 is 36. So you have two answers for this. You have 6 and negative 6. Okay, so for this one, I am going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm going to get the quantity x minus 5 squared, opposites cancel, equals 11 take away 2 is 9. Okay, to get rid of a square, we have to do its opposite. The opposite of square is square root. So I'm going to take the square root of x minus 5 squared equals, when you do that, you do plus or minus the square root of 9. Opposites cancel. So I have x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 9 is 3. X is still not by itself. I have to add 5 to both sides. So this is literally x equals 5 plus 3 and 5 minus 3 if I split the plus and minus apart. So 5 plus 3 is 8 and 5 minus 3 is 2. So those are the two answers for that one. Okay, the next one, I am going to go ahead and recognize that this is a perfect square trinomial here. So a perfect square trinomial, you have your x, bring down the sign, take the square root of the last number, 16, square root of 16 is 4, and that's squared. So all I did was factor this trinomial here. Now I can do like I did in the previous problem. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X minus 4, quantity squared, equals, when you take the square root, it's plus or minus the square root of 3. Opposites cancel. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So x equals, you can split this apart. You can say 4 plus the square root of 3 and 4 minus the square root of 3. Antonio drops a rock from a cliff that is 400 feet high. The function y equals negative 16t squared plus 400 gives the height of the rock in feet after t seconds. Write and solve an equation to determine how long it takes the rock to land at the base of the cliff. And they give you a hint. The base of the cliff, the height y is 0. So I can literally say, just take the function, 16t squared plus 400 equals 0, because that's what they're telling us here. So I am going to, it's a negative 16, sorry about that. Negative 16 squared, I'm going to subtract 400 from both sides, equals negative 400. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 16. So t squared equals, negative 400 divided by 16 is 25. So t squared equals 25. I'm going to take this opposite of square is square root. When you do that, you do plus or minus the square root of 25. Opposites cancel. T equals plus or minus 5. So that's 5 and negative 5. However, in a real world application, you got to be careful. We cannot have a negative, we're solving for t, we can't have a negative number of seconds. So in a real world application, most of the time, the positive answer is your answer. So 5 seconds is how long it took. Okay. Maya wants to use square roots to solve the equation x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals k. Where k is a positive real number, what is the solution to the equation? Well, in front of your equal sign, it's a perfect square trinomial again, so that's x, you bring down the minus, the square root of 9 is 3 squared equals k. You solve it just like we've been solving it, you're just going to leave k in your answer. So I've got to take the opposite of squaring is square root. Opposites cancel. X minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of k. Add 3 to both sides. X equals 3 plus the square root of k. And x equals 3 minus the square root of k.